am Jennifer Campbell, creator and host of the Systemic Leadership Summit. Welcome to this session. And today we are going to be talking about the methodology of deep democracy and what it takes to work with societal issues in groups of many shapes and sizes. My guest for today does really intense work with groups, and he's here today to share about his experience with the deep democracy and process work method. And his name is Max Schupbach. Now, Max is the founder of the Deep Democracy Institute, DDI for short, and it's a think tank, a learning hub, and a consulting group based on the process work paradigm, an inclusive whole system paradigm developed by Arnold and Amy Mendel and colleagues. One of Mendel's earlier studies, Max has brought this coaching, conflict resolution, and large group facilitation approach to many different communities worldwide, including grassroots movements, Fortune 100 groups, movement bodies and executives, social activist groups, and artist collectives. He co-developed DTI, which is active in Europe, USA, the Middle East, North and East Africa, and Southeast Asia, Ukraine, and Russia. He works with and very much enjoys the diverse co-learning community. Now, Max lives with his partner, Ellen, in a small town on the Oregon coast, where he enjoys various sports, organic cooking, and reading off the beaten track publications, I should say that correctly, on the topics of culture and also dissident views on to the common narratives of the reasons for today's problems. Interesting. And today he's here. So a very warm welcome to you, Max. I'm so delighted to have you here in this summit with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I was excited when we met in person in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. You're a great viewers, and I was looking forward to the interview.
Yeah, okay.
The project that you have is this leadership summit. I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I just really invited you to have a conversation with me today for all our viewers within this context of the summit, because I think that your work brings such an interesting angle and fractal, so to speak, of the field of the systemic and what leaders can also do with this in practice. And actually, I want to start off with a more personal question to you, Max. And that is, in the intro, I mentioned that you really love to read these, let me say it correctly this time, off the beaten track publications. And that you like reading about dissident views to the common narratives. So could you share with me, why do you like this so much?
Well, you know, the basic approach in deep democracy, which we'll be able to speak about now in this next hour or so, mm-hmm. As you know, and I'm sure many of your viewers and listeners are familiar with, is sort of based on a concept of three types of experiential levels or awareness levels. Mm. So like one level that we frame as process workers or deep democracy facilitators would be something that we call consensus reality. Mm-hmm. So that works on the assumption that there's nothing that is actually real, but consensus reality is what you and me and everybody else who's in the room would agree is real.
In the here and now.
So in the here and now, okay. Or if you turn on the television, they assume somehow that the viewer and the speaker somehow experience or agree with what's real. Mm-hmm. And the moment something that they think is not real, then the speaker will say, we have something really weird happening today, right?
Yeah.
Meaning it's out of the agreed normality. Mm-hmm. So I think like everyday consciousness that you have when you get up in the morning and face your daily existence.
Mm-hmm.
Not your existence, but your daily existence. A nightly existence when you dream, it's an altogether other ball game, right?
Okay.
You face your everyday consciousness sees like what's real, what's not real. You agree, you somehow agree on. And we have a second level, awareness level, which I'll say more about it in process work, which works on the assumption that you partially also notice at the same time, like energetic interactions, vibes that are present, and you have your imagination is going, you feel things that sort of don't go along with what they look, and call that level the dreaming level. As you will hear maybe in a little while, because Mendel's key work in the 70s was to show that night dreams that we have are reflected in our body symptoms during the day.
Oh, okay.
So then we have like this dreaming, so to speak, dreaming awareness, and we have sort of an essence awareness. I'll say more about this. But the basic idea is that what we perceive and agree on, and what we fight over, and what we conflict over, and what we disagree over, is sort of like a momentary expression of deeper, more meaningful dreaming interactions in the background, if you want.
So does that mean that the common narratives that you that you'd like to read different views about, are they in the consensus reality, or are they more in the other two levels?
I just wanted to make sure that my explanation was somehow still, that you could still follow my explanation.
Sure, sure. So there's three levels of reality that you distinguish in Deep Democracy. There's a consensus reality of we agree on the here and now and what's going on in day-to-day life. There's the dreaming state where there's things in the background that you are sometimes daydreaming about or feeling about, or sensations and vibes that are also part of your somewhat awareness. And then there is an essence state that is that's the further away from the alert and awakeness awareness that you have in consensus reality. And you're going to be explaining more about that later also. So those are the three that I understood from you. And my question was, do the common narratives that you like to read more the dissident type of views to, are those more the ones in consensus reality where we fight over things, or are they somewhere else?
Well, so I think the reason why I wanted to say that was, so in my everyday work, I work with consensus reality, which each group, each community has their own political correctness. And then within this system of political correctness, there are experiences that are marginalized. So they're on the margin and they're politically incorrect. And they appear in group work, we call these ghost roles. They appear, so to speak, as disturbers. So for example, of course, abuse of power is a big topic worldwide these days.
Yeah.
And for example, the empowerment of marginal groups around the isms like sexism, ageism, or I should say heterosexism, all these various isms that are present. As you know, we have a big racism, we have a big debate going on.
Yeah.
And worldwide. These are worldwide issues.
Yeah.
Where like abuse of power, awareness of privilege and rank is something at this point that I nearly encountered everywhere I work in one way or another. So that's like my daily work, or like environment. For example, how about nature, environment? Is there a viewpoint of the earth or a more sustainable living that should be heard? And then the other group who says, well, no, I mean, this is all about our survival, profit, etc. So these are the normal narratives that are my daily work.
Yeah.
And interested in my free time, I like to read people who are dissidents within those narratives. And I find it extremely happy. I really enjoy reading completely different viewpoints on why something is the way it appears and some historical factions. So I just put that, I think, into my bio because I love it, and I think it really helps me to understand better how the common narratives that are present now about why we have the problems that we do have, that we sort of all agree on. If you're a more progressive person, you agree on where the problem is, right? Like all those people that aren't progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you understand where the problem lies, which is all these progressive people, and I enjoy like reading like thinkers and people who think, well, maybe a lot of this is actually quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do these different voices say about reasons for today's problems? Because, like you said, there are big debates going on about big topics, and what's happening in the margin? Because it seems like, because of the big debates that are going on, more and more people feel really shaken in terms of how are we going to solve this, and there's a sense of urgency, but there's no necessarily clear direction where to go or look. So I'm just really curious what you take from these views that are slightly different, or that say something else is going on than what we have in our common narratives.
Yeah, I think this is connected. Thank you. It's a great question. And by the way, I'm not sure if I can give you clear answers, because it's really sort of a research project for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I'll give it a shot. For example, let's take the whole questions about inclusion in today's world, based on inclusion in the professional world,
Mm-hmm.
work world.
Yeah.
Like equity and equality for women, for people of color, for gay lesbians, for older people, for younger people, etc.
Yeah.
So I think there's a very good, these are amazing and deep and obviously crucial conversations, and quite a bit of my work is focused on this, where we're working on inclusion. Like there's a company and we're working on the inclusion of those various groups,
Mm-hmm.
and not just based on like an affirmative action necessarily, but based on a deeper relationship and more mutual communication. While at the same time, there is a debate going on the environment and global warming, where we have youth coming and saying, well, maybe the whole growth concept is actually wrong.
Yeah.
So what do I do with the fact that I think, well, these are really important voices. Maybe we need to change our entire lifestyle. Yet then I'm sitting in a company where we all agree it's very good to be ambitious and to make a career, and everybody should have the same chance having a career. And then it's difficult, because now we're trying to tell nations like Africa, I'm in Africa at the moment here, that they should become more environmentally conscious. And then some people here say, well, it's easy for you to say, let us first get a few cars, a few houses, then, like you have, and then maybe we're more open to understanding the environment.
Yeah, yeah.
So how to deal with these various things is like, I think, a lot of interesting thinkers around who are trying to work with all these intersectional problems.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and thank you for going on this exploration with me. As you say, it's an ongoing research project for you also. So thanks for thinking out loud. And actually, the reason I started out with these type of questions is that I want to look at the context or the contextual of what we're talking about. And for example, another topic that I see, because we're going to be talking about deep democracy, the word democracy elicits a lot for people also. And many feel that because of the complex problems and conflicts around that, and also tremendous amounts of change that we need to deal with, it it somehow becomes apparent to more and more people the question of what's going on with our democracy, and what do we do with it, and is it really a concept that supports us in dealing with all these problems? And so, yeah, what's your take on what's happening with our uh, democracy before we go into deep democracy?
Okay. Well, I think I just want to speak freely. What I'm thinking is also, it's not like, well, this is how I'm sure it is, but this is the assumption. So for me, the concept of democracy has become meaningless, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even I grew up in Switzerland. In Switzerland, we have a multi-party system that votes for a parliament. The parliament then votes for a group of 7 people who form the government, who among them elect the president, who is primus inter pares, meaning he has like a few ability to give the final vote, but also there to receive heads of states and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like representative.
Yeah.
Then I moved to the United States in my late 20s, and now I'm in the United States. It's a 2-party system where you elect the president and the various chambers, right? And I think I was always interested in politics from my perspective, to call both of these systems democracy makes no sense. For example, the fact that you have a 2-party system, I find at the moment in the United States is paralyzing the whole system. Like the moment you look in Europe, you have several multi-party systems, and which forces different groups to get along and communicate with other groups to find common ground.
Yeah.
You have a 2-party system, and they complain there is no common ground. Yeah, that's like 2 chess players. And now, okay, let's find common ground here. What, you win a little, I win a little? Understand?
Yeah.
So for me, these are really important things because they change the feeling atmosphere and the sense of inclusion that is in a country. Am I being represented? Like most people that I speak now in the USA feel, well, we don't really feel represented by either party.
Yeah.
So democracy already is complicated. But then democracy, in my mind, is an outdated concept. It's a great concept insofar that it helped to deal with aristocracy and and oligarchy, like the rule of a few.
Yeah.
And to have something like a majority system, I think that was really, really great. And but now I feel in a complex world, for example, like you can vote. I work in Ukraine a lot. You can vote for a president in Ukraine. And now it's all in the news. It doesn't, if you look at the problems that Ukraine has, they're barely much, in my personal experience, they're barely much created by Ukraine and the Ukrainians. They're like created by global politics, the superpowers, for whom they're like a chess piece. So what do I vote for? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I do feel we need like a completely different way of approaching inclusion, and to deal with inclusion, and to have stakeholders like look at a particular problem, look at who are the actual stakeholders in the background, and get these stakeholders onto a table where we can facilitate a meaningful dialogue between the stakeholders.
Yeah.
Like, if I may add something, for example, I'm convinced, just go back to Ukraine, that you might think of the Russian government, whatever your political view is, but basic stance of Russia is understandable if you know the history and the development of Russia. But it seems like on the other side of the stakeholders, nobody can understand what's in the background. You look at the United States, you understand, if you see the history, you understand where they come from. They make sense. They might look strange or wrong to you, but they make sense. So I think, like, at times I'm really frustrated that don't these people have consultants who actually help them to understand what the other is doing, and not just consulting them how you can beat the other one. So as you can see, I have a lot of passion about these things. So understand, for example, the superpowers, understanding the large corporations, how they work together, what they contribute, and having the stakeholders somehow represented. I think that's the future and the direction to go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your view on this. And I don't want to be, let me put it this way. I think that people who hold similar views as you do, I think that we're coming out of the margins, because more and more people realize that there are so many big forces at play, and how much influence do you actually have on these forces? Like the example that you mentioned about Ukraine, that you're allowed to vote for a president, but what good does that do if the fate of your country is in the hands of forces outside your very country? And I see similar sort of patterns where organizations, big and small, are so much influenced by forces that happen in society, that when they're trying to organize themselves well or to survive in a turbulent world, it's very difficult for them to solve particular problems or to stop repeating old solutions or old patterns, simply because the forces seem too big to handle within the boundaries of the organization.
And if I may add there, we think alike in this area, which makes me very happy. And what, if I might, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
If I might insert there, and lack of understanding of rank and privilege all the way down. Like, I work, for example, whole system approach in a corporation. I see the people who have middle management above them, they think middle management can be complicated. The middle management is asked to relate to the workforce, but at the same time, and to empower the workforce, at the same time, they actually have to produce results for the management. The management looks, for example, at the board, and they sometimes complain, how come the leadership doesn't have enough time for me? But I'm also working with the leadership, and the leadership has their hands full managing their investor relationships or happening on the stock market. And nobody understands that everybody's trying to do their best. So, so there's always like a scapegoat. Someone is the problem. And I think part of what we do in deep democracy is trying to bring understanding that actually everybody is doing their best. Once you have more communication about that, people start to work more together and collaborate, the mood gets better, and the group as a whole becomes stronger.
So as we're moving into what deep democracy is, you're actually saying, and that's why I asked you about your views on democracy first, is because the term is incorporated in deep democracy. So, so what is deep democracy then, and how is it different from democracy?
Okay. Well, now I want to go back for a moment to the psychological aspect of process work. So process work grew out of Jungian psychology and physics. So Arnold Mindell is a physicist.
Yeah.
So like, and coming out of Jungian psychology, like in my experience, he sort of followed the late Jung, who got very much interested in making the connection between Jungian psychology and physics with synchronicity. And Jung himself had a lot of like physicist friends in terms of like the actual body-mind connection or psyche-matter. What is the connection between psyche and matter? And Arnold Mindell's primary work was, at the time, before he came onto the Jungian stage, the general belief was that we have an autonomous organizing principle in ourselves that the people, the Freudian Jungians called the unconscious, that are organizing our behavior, so that some of us we feel we're in control of and others we are not in control of. And the part, to understand what happens with the part that we're not in control of, they believed you have to study the night dreams.
Okay.
Because in everyday behavior, you are actually like the one who is on the steering wheel. You cannot talk only to the one that's on the steering wheel, who has his own opinion why the car isn't always doing the way she or he is driving it, but you can't talk to the car directly. For that, you have to look what the person dreams at night, and then through the symbolism, for example, you understand the deeper meaning of why the car does weird things in spite of the driver during the day. Right? A short overview of that psychology.
Yeah.
And Arne's beginning work was the dream body, in which he showed that you can work with a body center. Like, let's say you have a headache, and you work on the headache, and you might find, like in the headache, a pounding energy that goes like this.
Yeah.
That people will say, "Wow, last night I dreamt someone was beating a drum in a festival." So if you unfold, we call that, if you make space for these body experiences that you experience as body symptoms or illness or whatever, they're symmetric to the patterns that you have that you dream at night.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that was his work in the 70s. And we've done a lot of work on the dream body. We had like a clinic in the United States that we ran like 3-4 times a year, where people from all over the world would come with their body symptoms. And we treat the body symptom as a marginalized voice, not as a problem, not because you did something wrong. It's not like a car, because if you did something wrong, you now have this problem, and if you do the right thing, the problem will go away. But that the body symptom itself was a voice that needed to be heard. And in order to listen to it, you had to make space for the body symptom. And then with all these techniques, how you can turn it into movement or into images, whatever, so that you understand what the body is trying to tell you. trying to tell the day driver.
Yeah. So let me see if I understand you correctly. So you say that you look at in this example the body symptoms as marginalized voices that are trying to be heard, and that your body, especially in the dream state, holds a lot of information or reflects back this voice. And if you go and look there, then you can actually work with the symptom to convert it so that it's easier to hear the message that's actually inside of it. Did I get that right?
Yes. So, for an example, I have, like, since my early youth, a problem on one of my knees. And give different diagnoses at the moment. They would call it more something like an arthritis problem. And I can't quite bend it, but it's been around for a long time. Oh, on one level, I actually have a problem on my knee, which I'm working on with various fun things, right? On another level, I also have to face the fact that overall, I think of myself as a really flexible person. A lot of my work is about being flexible.
Yeah.
I have a part of me that won't bend. So if push comes to shove, one part of me won't compromise.
Yeah.
And it's an inner tension that I have because I like to see myself as flexible. And, each culture has its own negotiation style. So Switzerland, being a small nation, you grow up understanding that flexibility is your key to happiness, and that everything is a negotiation.
Yeah.
Because you learn very little. You're so small. You get squashed by all the big neighbors, Germany, Italy, France, whatever. So you have to negotiate with big neighbors.
Yeah.
And but then my knee says, but there's a bottom line, and if that one is reached, then that's the end. So my body is reflecting back to me my nature, and my nature is reflecting itself back to my knee. Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I also wonder what happens when you actually hear the voice. Does the volume of the voice go down because it now feels heard? Or is it, for example, in the case of your knee, a constant reminder of the place in the bigger system that's you that is not so flexible compared to the rest of you that wants to be flexible or grew up in a context where flexibility is a positive thing? So does it stay there, or does it, what happens?
I love how you formulate this question. Well, I think of it as like a relationship. Yes? A relationship, let's suppose there are actually two of us. The part that's more like my knee, and then my everyday consciousness, which is more into flexibility. Right? So let's suppose we're a couple. One of us is flexible, and the other one is really stiff and won't budge. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's suppose first of all, we won't divorce. I could divorce my knee, go to a doctor and say, do whatever you need to do. I don't want this. And divorce the process completely from me. So what a lot of people don't say, how are you? I am great. Really? You feel healthy? Oh yeah, there's my knee. Like, I am great, but my knee, that's my divorced partner. It's sort of having a life of its own somewhere.
Yeah.
Or we actually, over time, can discover we still love each other. And then I'm learning from the knee, and the knee is feeling more appreciated and also changes somehow how it feels. It might not get, it's not that the symptom will disappear, but I will develop a different relationship with it. And then the experience of the symptom will change.
Right.
So, for example, my knee actually is a little bit more flexible, but also it got stronger. And also it shows its strengths in other areas. Like a few years ago, I started Thai kickboxing, and my knee loves it and is doing really well in it. So it's a lover relationship. I appreciate it a lot. and it starts to appreciate my flexibility, and we're having a good time together.
Right. Right.
But sometimes the symptoms do just go away, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I find this fascinating, this example, and thank you so much for sharing this, because um, um, when we tie it back, because we're using this example in the context of trying to understand what deep democracy is. And what I derive from this example is that you say, when deep democracy is a way of connecting with voices that have a tendency to be marginalized, and to reestablish connection and an open dialogue, so that you can see what's possible from that connection when the voice is in. And that doesn't mean that the voice dissolves or is assimilated by all the other voices, but it's part of the tapestry of what's possible from the interaction between all the voices, including the marginalized one. So
yes, even in addition to that, like if you go back to the example I just gave, the knee, we would call is the dreaming level. Yes, it's not a reality level. So take, for example, so deep democracy, how I understand how the founder typed it, means that you make equal time over time, that you give equal, or maybe not strictly equal, but that you hear to the experiences of all these three levels. So I'll give you an example. We have, like, for example, in the United States, we have at the moment, in my mind, a much harsher dialogue than political dialogue than we used to have in the past.
Yeah.
And that we used to have a few years before. I don't know, but the past, maybe some decades back, it was 10 times as worse. What do I know? But a lot of people feel it's become like less civil or what have you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are really furious. So let's suppose, so for me, deep democracy would be to have a leadership that doesn't necessarily give in with their viewpoints, because they were elected, but is also able to relate to the other side and to the anger to the other side in a constructive way.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, well, we have like two parties, I think, in fact, we actually have 8 parties. One party has won, one party has lost, one dream party is furious, one dream party is really depressed, one dream party has enough from the whole politics. And we need a leader that is somehow able, or a leadership, or more awareness in the population. I don't even think it has to be a leader. So for me, it is realizing these things don't go away. They're important.
Yeah.
If I have a negotiation with you and you're upset, happy, or feel incomplete at the end, this is a highly unstable situation. These things need to be heard and addressed. So this is deep democracy. But it starts with yourself. Like, I feel I spend so much time, which I love, trying to figure out, where am I really? I really like to do this. This looks really good. And I think I could do it, but there is a resistance in me. Do I really want to do it? Is it the right thing for me? And making time for those inner conflicts and seeing if you can find an inner congruent understanding of all these roles and what they do.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's deep democracy. We have 2 or 3 people who can do that in any group. That's going to affect the group positively.
Right. Oh, so that's also interesting. So what you're saying is whichever system or context you take, whether it's you on your own as you're living your life and making your choices, um, or a team or an organization or a society, there is an opportunity to develop your deep democracy stance or attitude or skills, regardless of how you want to call it, but have something in there, a process that helps you to hear marginalized voices within yourself or in the team or in the bigger contexts. And that capability, let me call it that way, if you have that capability within a group, then that can already create a lot more openness about what's present in the whole, what possibilities we have. And it doesn't mean that conflicts should go away, but that they have a function, and that has to do with are we able to hear the voices enough and acknowledge what their unique contribution is to all the other voices, so that we can then create from there.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, Max, I wanted to ask you, you work sometimes with really big groups on big societal issues or things that are happening in countries or in continents, or so could you share an example of how you do that? Because if you do this on your own, this may be difficult enough, or in a relationship of between two people. But if you have a group of people, not necessarily from an entire nation that you're talking about, or a group of people, and you're working on a global issue, and how do you work with deep democracy to actually create some movement in that?
So then I work on the assumption that in order to support change, you actually don't have to change a majority. Changing interacting with, interacting with and learning from local change agents and supporting local change agents to have all their experiences and not just those that they feel are politically correct. As a whole, in my mind, is more impactful than if you say, okay, let's make a big change process where we roll it out in our organization and everybody has to go through it. So we work also I work also like with particular focuses. For example, going back to the Ukraine, because I already started with that, in the Ukraine, we've done open forum among one of the things. We've done open forum. We have a particular topic. At one point, I remember when the East Ukrainian tension grew, and before the annexation of Crimea, there was a discussion, does Ukraine need an army? And we made an open forum, and the open forum was televised, and we had maybe about 300 Ukrainians that came, and they heard like different opinions.
Yeah.
So we think an important part is having open forums, if you can get them on TV or something, so that people feel, well, actually I have political agency here. Like for me, I came to the universities in my 20s during the 60s movement, and before that I never thought that I would have a political voice, but the university gave me political agency. I thought, oh no, I actually can do something and have an impact. And the open forums help to wake groups up and say, I don't have to just take what's going on. I can actually have a voice and I can contribute or make a decision or have the conversation then on the dinner table, where like one member says, I saw this open forum was really good. And then another family member says, I think this is all bullshit. The government anyhow does what they do. So you have the open forum at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we were the government, for example. Then with the government, I don't think I'm like sharing a lot of secrets here. They're basically like all leadership issues. They have like different stakeholders, different agendas, and a different rank.
Yeah.
They have to work on all the isms, sexism, racism, what have you, and then the ghost of the past and the pressure of the public.
Yeah.
There is. I don't know if you're familiar with Dambisa Moyo. I'm a big fan of her. She's living now in England, and she's from Ghana. She's an economist, and she wrote one of the books. She has a quote in the beginning by, I think you say Juncker, the previous president of the EU.
Mm-hmm.
The quote was, "We all would know what to do. We just don't know how to do it and getting re-elected."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an issue. We always think it's the leadership, but the rest, like the grassroots, needs to wake up, and everybody must think, well, I'm the president. I can lead this country. I have my talents where I can influence my village, my community, my family. And instead of looking to the leadership and the governments, what can they do for us?
Yeah. Yeah. And also there's this, in addition to that, there's this expectation that for the leadership to be in role means that they are able to accomplish everything. And what I'm discovering more and more is that many leaders in very big contexts actually get swallowed by the entire context and feel a lot of force from whoever they are representing, and can't move much. It's different in business, but especially when I look at society or government, then all of politics are what we see in the US now. It's not about the president. It's not about that one person who everybody says they're influencing. It's not about that. There's a whole system, a whole movement around that dictates what a president can and cannot do. And usually it's actually not that much. That's my suspicion around that. I just feel that projections and also media.
You can do more. You create a systemic leadership summit. You have like speakers from all different backgrounds coming speaking.
Yeah.
You have a community of viewers and listeners who have chosen, who are not forced to learn, but they have chosen to learn.
Yeah.
They can't get any better than this. This is where change happens.
Sorry, they can? I missed the last bit.
It cannot get better than this. This is where change happens. You have people that actually learn because they want to learn, and they come together and they exchange opinions and integrate in their own daily life in one way or another. It can't get better than this. I think for me, that's the future of leadership. The rest is also good, why not? I'm not against in principle.
Okay. Well, that would be a whole different discussion in terms of how much leadership I feel I can sort of stir up through this summit. But I'm overly ambitious when it comes to that, and creating or co-creating change, and the waking up and the shaking up that I hope that this summit also does. But
it's an important. I'd like to go back to that point for a moment.
Yeah.
I think if I look at my own life, since we created the Deep Democracy Institute, now we work, for example, in Iraq. I'm in Kenya now. We're in Egypt. We just come back from a big intensive in Thailand, where we learned, for example, when we said listen to different voices, we learned to the silence of the Buddhist Thai and the wisdom that is in the silence. And And so I find I'm no longer feeling, I know we're sort of a learning hub. I think I'm the one who learns the most. And I feel I'm changing the most.
Yeah.
And I used to feel guilty about that. And now I think maybe that's how it should be, or that's how it is. Like, we're all learning, we're all a work in progress, and we have to learn to be patient with ourselves and with everybody else. It's a steep climb. There's a lot of really difficult topics out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're overall good as long as we're together and learning. I'm very hopeful.
Yeah.
And there's always one or two people who want to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. This last piece about you're learning the most is something that I also often feel. I feel very privileged to be a host of the summit and to have these conversations and bring many voices in, because now we get to speak of it. I think that what I'm trying to do with the summit also is create a type of deep democracy in the field of the systemic, and because I feel that many approaches are not really talking, or not always open and willing to hear the other approaches. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with having conflicts between the approaches, because then at least they're in communication. But for me to present them in the context of this summit and put them at least in one program, even though maybe panel discussions should be some next steps for this summit, where there's actually interaction between people who hold different fractals of the systemic web, because the field is there, and we do all that work out there with all our approaches, but who knows what could come from connecting even more and strengthening our voices in the world. Yeah.
I have to say, Jennifer, I love you for that. I mean, there's always disagreements about in all communities. And I would also, I feel in the systemic community, I also hope that we'll be more, eventually have more of a sense of a family with various conflicts with cousins.
Yeah.
Which is like, has a different feel from, well, we don't know what they're doing, and there's like isolation or something like that. So I think it's an amazing service that you give, because, of course, if you actually have a problem, you don't really care who solves it as long as it's being solved,
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for that. And there's a few more things I want to ask you before we close off, because time is flying as we're having our conversation. And one is, how does this deep democracy process and the including of voices then work? Because you just said, if you work with a group, is not necessarily to have the entire majority or the entire group to whom the topic belongs. For example, if there's an issue around Europe or something, obviously you don't need to have all of Europe in the room. But how do you work with a group then? What does that look like?
Well, tell me if you can. You don't have to, but just on the odd chance, tell me a problem that you ever heard of, an organization or a government or something that you would have. That you heard of, or...
Yeah, well, something that's happening in my home country is that many farmers are very angry because we have a nitrogen problem. We are one of the countries that produces a lot of nitrogen. And so the government is trying to regulate that by cutting down the quota and having all these different measures, and it affects the farmers, and farmers don't agree. and they feel like, okay, we understand that within Europe or within the world, we need to lower the carbon or the nitrogen, but we feel like we're paying much too high of a price. And so in all these provinces, we've had farmers like blocking traffic, and actually it got to very hostile type of explosions of communication, where they would go to government buildings or other type of institutes, where they would just break
so
things.
Example,
so they're very angry. So this is a very tangible example here in my home country, what's going on. So how would you work with that?
So deep democracy approach would be, of course, ideal, would be if somebody in the government would say, this is not going to go down well with the farmers, right? And then say, okay, let's use the deep democracy approach. Also, we see the necessity of reducing the nitrogen use. We have a stakeholder that will actually suffer from it.
Yeah.
And who will feel it's not fair. We are doing something for the entire system. How come they're the one who's supposed to pay the price?
Yeah.
So before we even start about it, we need to have a stakeholder congregation. What you call that? A stakeholder meeting. Invite the various farmer groups. Farmers usually are in Europe, farmers are usually pretty well organized. So you get like the various farmers organizations together, and we start the dialogue, presenting the problem, hearing all the voices, and finding solutions. Farmers as a whole are stubborn. Why? Because they know the truth. Why do they know the truth? Because they live on the earth.
Yeah.
So they feel if you live on the earth, you have a completely different sense of your viewpoint than if you're sitting on a 15th floor government building where you look at numbers. Am I making sense? This is a dreaming process. I'm in the earth. I'm like planting the tulips. I'm relating to that. I have dirt on my boots. So I know what I'm saying is actually founded on what I'm doing. And up there is a government person on the 15th floor who gives me numbers of pollution or something like that. I won't budge easily. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So you in that process, just for my understanding, would you actually bring the farmers in the room?
Ideally early on, but at this point, sorry for interrupting. So early on, before you even start making like having press release or whatever, I would have the farmers in there so they don't have to hear it. But if at this point you have a demonstration, if I was the government, I would say, first of all, bring in both sides, right? So if I was a consultant of the government, I would say, come out publicly and say, we apologize to the whole nation, and we apologize especially to our farmers who have been a large basis of Dutch economic success. No, Holland is not just tourism; it's a strong farming background, among other things.
Yeah.
And, for not having seen enough the consequences that it have for you. Yeah. We want to find a solution. We have to find a solution, but we want to include your expertise, your knowledge, and whatever. Sit together and see how can we dampen the negative effects. The fact that the government comes out apologizing already will quiet down the farmers.
Right.
And
right.
Definitely, I would have a big meeting with farmer representatives, 300-400 in there, the government, is various other stakeholders, and have a group process where we bring out those various topics. You've been part of one of these in various roles, and have a dialogue. And you, within a day or so, you have beginning talking points of people that you can then break down into continuous conversations, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the larger issue is that if you have something that at this point is at a critical point, like when you say there's like demonstrations, whatever, it actually makes it easier for a direct dialogue. I rather facilitate a group that's in a violent conflict than a group that is sort of half warming up a little bit and they're not quite there. They're easier to work with. But government as a whole fear that. So they don't want to have a direct dialogue because they think these people are going to be out of control. They don't realize that one of the reasons that these groups get out of control is because there is no partner on the other side they can talk to.
Yeah. This really reminds me of these images in the news where the farmers were breaking down a governmental building, and on the other end of the door were the police who were really trying to keep them out. And at some point, the farmers just took their tractor and drove the thing right into the building, and so there was no way for the police to stop them. And some people were also injured and things like that. So, and could you then tell me, Max, why is it that you would then rather work with people who are right at that edge of the conflict, where they're ready to fight openly and be because the tendencies to that things escalate, the chances of that are pretty big. So how do you contain that in a deep democracy process, or do you not contain it, or what do you do there?
Then I would say, from a deep democracy facilitator viewpoint, if you know how to facilitate escalation, that's not all that complicated. But I want to give you an example that makes sense to you.
Yes, please, because I can imagine that there are many people who are watching right now and thinking, well, are we just going to have one big fight in a room, or what does that look like?
Okay, well, let me first say why I say there's a facilitator, and then I'll give you the scenario. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. Okay. So let's suppose you actually are interested in your health. I said in the beginning, if the government would actually be interested in deep democracy dialogue, they would think about that ahead of time, and it would never even like stir a wave, because they would realize we're going to have a problem with the farmers on this. Let's talk to them early on, right? And so then that's the same, like, okay, I'm a relatively, not me, but let's say I'm a person who's relatively health conscious, and I'm noticing there's a little tension in my back, or my appetite is not quite anymore as it is, and I'm starting to experiment. What am I? Should I change my food? What makes me feel better, etc. Right? But I don't know. This could be maybe something serious here, or here, or here, or here, and I want to early on relate to that and see if it needs a lifestyle change and start to play around with it. Right? The equivalent would be the government who says we're going to have a problem with the farmers. Let's talk to them. No, if you work with people with body symptoms, either if they're very health conscious, you can work with them early on. That's of course but then otherwise, if they're really sick, it's the hardest. But in a way, they're the easiest to work with, because now they actually really are in pain. And because they're in pain, they actually are looking for help. Am I making sense?
That makes sense. It makes sense. Actually, when people are in pain, it's just a voice getting really loud. It's the same as the people who start demonstrating and breaking down things. And
you read in the newspaper, you read, don't eat too much sugar, don't eat diabetes. You say, Good. Then at one point, the doctor says, you know what? There is a voice here that is on the yellow volume, and you think, okay, for 2 or 3 days you're like trying to be more health conscious, but then suddenly your cholesterol or your sugar is up, and it's in the red, and now suddenly they're demonstrating, right? your insulin is demonstrating, and then you suddenly wake up and then people start to change. It's normal. So in that sense, But I like to tell you something about why it's easier to work with escalation if you understand what you're doing. Okay? So we process workers think that groups are organized by a role structure. Okay? So their background is a dreaming process, a background role. So for example, you have a room with angry farmers in there. If you have a facilitator there who understands the depth, the meaning of the anger. And for example, I've been working in Holland for many years, so I love the Dutch and I understand many things about the Dutch culture now that I didn't understand 10 years ago. But let's say, for example, I was in a room like this as a Dutch facilitator, and I could stand up and I could say, before, there's a lot of tension here in the room, but let me tell you, if I may, first, if I was a farmer, I would think, and if you can catch the role better than the farmers know themselves, they'll naturally de-escalate.
Yeah. So this means that as a facilitator, you what you do is you step into their world, you step into their viewpoints, opinions, and what they're trying to bring to the table, and voice out when you step in, so that they can have a sense of acknowledgement of the role that they're playing, of the voice that they are trying to bring across in the bigger context.
Like let's say, for example, if I was there, let me take a shot in the dark, okay? If I was there and I would say, as a facilitator, I would feel as a farmer. Here I am, a Dutch farmer. For decades, I have produced wealth for this country. I'm one of the reasons why we have a major cheese industry. I'm one of the reasons why we have a major flour industry. I'm one of the reasons why worldwide so many agricultural practices have been picked up from us. And I am doing this through hard farm work, and I am partially the reason why a lot of Dutch people and these government people in their BMWs are doing so well. And now you're coming and telling me, as I'm a stupid idiot, that I have to stop nitrogen. What are you thinking? If I can catch the deeper value of the farming, and not just saying, well, we hate the environment and we just want to make money. But if I can catch that, the farmers will relax and they feel, okay, we have a representative here who actually also understands us from the depths of who we are. We are actually good people. It's not just like, you know what I mean?
Is that the deep in deep democracy?
Yeah, that's the deep in the deep democracy. And if you then can go on the other side and say in the government, I'm sorry, we have voters and then we have this and we have to think of everyone. And yes, we didn't see you enough. We didn't feel with the human difficulties enough. They have a lifestyle too, I don't know, I haven't met yet that's not true. I haven't met too many people yet who like to be told that they're going to make less money.
Yeah. So is it in this process then, just from this example, that here we are in an escalating type of situation, and you say that if you were a deep democracy facilitator in this context, you would first go to the more marginalized voice that is really on the verge of exploding, and see if you can voice to voice and name the underpinnings and name the underlying values of what the voice represents, just like your knee represents the limit of where you're flexible and where you're no longer flexible and you're not going to change or not going to budge, and then you go to the other voices. Because it's not like the pendulum needs to swing to the other side.
But before that, if this was an open meeting, before that I would go to the government, because I don't know the situation enough, so I might be wrong. But from the little that I know about it, I would say maybe the government has the most power and rank, and I would like go to the whoever does that Ministry of Agriculture and talk to them and say, look, I think you're on the right track with this, obviously, and maybe you have no choice because of EU standards or whatever. And we can have a dialogue where I can guarantee you as a facilitator, not that the farmers will accept the new standards, but that you will come out with a dialogue culture that will make solutions possible that are sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're in a hard spot. And maybe in the beginning, you will see us as a facilitation team helping the farmers to express completely what their upsetness is about. But you should know, we understand, because the government, that's a really tough spot. You know, like who wants to be in the government? You have to be faced to be in the government. Don't you think? Nobody likes the government. Everybody has like a complaint. The government, either the government is not giving me a job, the government is not creating an economy where I can make money, and then the government is ruining the environment. The government is everybody's fault, is the government.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this example. So what I understand from Deep Democracy and how and the different examples that you just mentioned, how important it is to actually bring the marginalized voices in the room, but not at the expense of the existing voices, but as an opening up of the space where a dialogue can take place and where different voices can be heard and can hear each other, so that you're working on a deeper layer. It's not about saying, oh, we're solving this problem because we're just going to make sure that the farmers will sort of walk back in line, so to speak. That's not what it's about. What Deep Democracy is about is to get the dialogue going, to hear and be heard, and create a more sustainable playing field to find solutions for these big things, because they're big problems. They're not an A to Z type of thing, and it doesn't help to blame one voice and say, okay, we're looking to you to solve this entire big thing. No, there's actually this interdependency, interconnectedness there that requires that all voices are in. So that's my understanding.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. We are running out of time, so I'm going to see what the last question is that I want to ask you. And most of the time, and I'm inclined to go back there, even though I have a sense, is that I ask people, speakers, people I'm in conversation with in the summit, about the impact of their approach on them. And so my question to you is Max, with Deep Democracy and process work, as we talked about it today, who do you serve out in the world, or who do you want to serve? And what does this work bring you? How did it impact you in your leadership in your life by doing so?
Well, I grew up in the Swiss mountains, and I feel I had nice parents, yet in a way I feel I was raised by the mountains. I had a lot of freedom as a kid, and I spent a lot of time outdoors in beautiful, sweet, gorgeous, and also very rough nature, like dropping temperatures to -35 in the winter, which I love, snowstorms, and then beautiful blue skies. And I really felt I belong here. I still do. And I feel through my work that has somehow changed. And I'm touched. I feel.
Yeah.
I feel I belong to the universe.
Yeah.
So I feel the earth belongs to the universe. I love the sun who gives us light. And I feel I'm touched by that. Also, we have so many difficulties. I feel very optimistic about our future. I feel our parents, the universe, won't leave us alone.
Mm. Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering. And for sharing your voice with us.
Thank you for having me. Love you.
Yeah.
I learn a lot from you, from how you summarize and how you lead things. I'm serious.
Thank you.
And I learned a lot. Yeah. And I like your straight, how you stay on track and all of this, while at the same time being so feeling related, warm and interested. I think it's an amazing experience to be interviewed.
Thank you so much, Max. And well, the feeling is all mine. I feel very humbled by our conversation and also by your willingness to be moved by a question I ask. And I'm sure that everyone who's watching can really sense how deep your work runs for you. And yeah, so thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
We've run out of time, so we need to close off.
Best wishes to all your viewers. Good luck with your project.
Yes, yes. So Max wishes you all good luck. I want to say thank you so much for watching and for hearing our voices. And I'm very curious about yours also, about what you feel that deep democracy can bring if you were to work with that more. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Take care. Bye-bye.